about daily school life, which is great and exciting. And because I'm sure you guys experience daily school life. So how many of you all go to school and then like do an activity after school, like sports or clubs or anything? Raise your hand if you do an activity after school. Okay, cool. Awesome. So it seems like a lot of you all are pretty busy. So you can put your hands down. Awesome. So when you go home, how many of you have to like find time to do chores after school or before school? Raise your hand if you have to do chores, like cleaning or things like that. Okay. Yeah. So some of you, yeah, that's cool. And then raise your hand if you also have to do homework once you get home from school. So raise your hand if you have to do homework. All right, everyone. Cool. So it seems like you're all pretty busy after school. And how many of you guys feel like you get time to like relax and just like have some time to hang out with your family after school? Do many of you all get to do that? Raise your hand if yes. Okay, so some. So then it seems like you all are pretty busy if you have chores, homework, after school activities. And I think that you'll find that that's pretty similar for a lot of children as well, in various countries. So like we said today, we're going to be talking, Sylvia is going to go first and is going to talk about Hungary. And then I'm going to talk about daily school life in Nicaragua. And then Annie is going to go and she's going to talk about school life in China. So Sylvia, you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone, again. Okay, here we go. Let me remember how to do the shared screen thing because that's, we haven't been on, like, to talk to you guys recently. It's been a little while, I think. Okay. I'm sorry. Again, the whole, like, final situation, like, just a lot going on. So we're all sort of, like, not our best state. It's maybe the best way to say that. Okay, so I am going to present, and I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Okay, so Hungary, yay! Has anybody, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Hungary? Okay. Very nice, yes. Yeah, you guys probably might remember some of my presentations beforehand. Okay, so Hungary is located in Central Eastern Europe. It's very close to, it's pretty close to Germany. It's next to Austria, Slovakia, these places kind of right in the heart of Europe, which is pretty cool. Fun fact about me, my family's from Sopron, but, Budapest is the capital, and there's a lot of fun things to do in this country. So yeah, that's a little background on Hungary, and about 10 million people live there. Okay, so here's some facts about education in Hungary. So everyone basically starts off going to the óvoda, which is like kindergarten. Raise your hand if you went to kindergarten. Yeah, so like a lot of people, right? Did you like it? Like kindergarten's a pretty fun time, right? You just kind of chill for the most part. You're learning, you're reading, learning how to read and write, etc. Elementary school is the next phase for children in Hungary. It's called általános iskola, and it goes from like 6 years old to 14 years old. So it's actually like they don't really have like a middle school. The grade that you guys would be in would be a part of like elementary school still, before high school. And high school is kind of like it's very different, I guess, than here, because high school like either is going to prepare you for college or it's going to prepare you for a career. So that's really different than here, where it seems like everyone goes to high school and you get like this education for, basically it's college prep education, but you can like, just get a high school degree or diploma and like go into the workforce. So it's like our high schools here are kind of like combined, like the Hungarian one. So there's two options. One is the gymnasium, which is like for people who want to go to college, who want to go further into their careers. And then the other one is the szakközépiskola, which is a vocational school, but the word for high school in Hungarian is just középiskola. which actually translates to like middle school, which is kind of ironic since that's like, there's not really like a middle school, but the high school is Középiskolai school. And so the decision of which high school to attend is important, and it's usually made after 8th grade. So after the általános iskola is done, the elementary school phase is done, then you decide basically like what you're going to do for high school. And as I said before, like when you go to high school, it basically determines like what your career path is going to be. So if you go to gymnasium, that means that you're going to basically go to college. And the szakközépiskola is a vocational school. You usually learn like a trade. So like you don't have to go you don't have to go straight into the workforce, but usually people do, and you don't really go to college. But that's decided like right after like you're 14 years old, basically, like after 8th grade level. So raise your hands, like if you guys would feel comfortable deciding like what you want to do basically for your entire life after 8th grade. No one? Anyone? Yeah, it's very different. So most people like by this time know kind of what they want to do. And again, if students want to continue their education, especially after gymnasium, they would attend the EGyetem, which is college or university. Okay, so here's some facts, a little more. So gymnasium is basically, again, people who want to go to college, who want to focus on academics. And the szakközépiskola is mainly for people who want to learn a trade or a vocation. So just kind of a fun fact about, my family. So my cousin in Hungary went to a szakközépiskola, and he learned a trade for forestry as his kind of like high school experience. So it's really different there. Not everyone is like pushed to go to college, because there's like a distinction between, those who like want to go to college or maybe are able to go to college, and those who are more interested in learning a vocation. And the divide between like those who go to college and those who don't go to college isn't as severe, I think, because I think in the US, like you kind of can be looked down upon if you don't go to college, or it's like you don't have as many opportunities, whereas in Hungary, like it's a different system. So it's actually pretty okay if you don't go to college, because you can like make a living and do pretty well otherwise, because there's different, rules that people play. Okay, so this is just like a little short activity to test your knowledge of what I've just told you. So if you think the student should go to gymnasium, keep your hand or put your hand up, okay? And then if you think they should go to szakközépiskola, put your hand down. And remember, gymnasium is like the people who are going to go to college usually, and szakközépiskola is for those who want to learn a trade. Okay, so for the first situation, the student wants to become an electrician. Should they go to gymnasium? Raise your hand if they should. Okay, got a couple people. I'll tell you the answers in a minute. Now, a student who wants to become a doctor, would they go to gymnasium? Yeah, that's a pretty easy one. Good. How about if they want to become a professor? Yeah, got it. Probably need to go to college for that, right? Fun fact, that's what I want to do. A student who wants to become a mechanic. Okay, yeah, you guys did a good job. Thanks for playing. So you're right. A student who wants to become an electrician and those who want to become a mechanic would be going to the szakközépiskola, and those who want to become a doctor or professor would be going to gymnasium. Okay, this is one more thing I'll add real quick. So languages, I'll just say that students in Hungary are generally taught in Hungarian. So just like you guys are taught most of your courses in English, they're taught it in Hungarian. However, because only about 15 million people in the world speak Hungarian, which is not a very big number, most students are encouraged to speak another language and learn another language, such as English or German, because, again, not many people outside of Hungary speak Hungarian, and most people want to, like, move abroad. Most of the young people do. And so there are also like bilingual education schools, so places in Hungary with like significant ethnic minorities. And during the Cold War, Russian was a mandatory language to learn because it was a satellite state of the Soviet Union. So for instance, my mom had to learn Russian for like 8 years. But yeah, so most students today either learn English or German, but my cousin is learning French right now. You know, they have like a wide variety of options. So raise your hand if you guys are learning a language or speak a second language. Do you speak one, or are you learning one? Very nice. Is anyone, keep your hand up if you're learning Spanish? Okay, Very nice. Put your hand down, everyone. And then raise your hand if you're like learning a language other than Spanish or speak another language other than Spanish. Okay, very cool. Yeah, so like it's all about proximity, right? I mean, like here we're a lot closer to like Mexico and like Latin America, South America, whereas there, like German-speaking countries are more prominent, and obviously English is like the lingua franca for the world. So that has to do with it as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, I'm gonna basically that's what I just did. But one more thing. So most of the time, students in Hungary begin to learn a language as early as age 10. But sometimes you can be 8 years old and starting it, and it usually continues throughout the entire time. So you're usually learning a signal language for a lot longer than maybe you would be here, whereas like most people start like in high school and just do it for 4 years, whereas there it's like, for almost 10 years in some cases, because many universities in Hungary teach courses in a language other than Hungarian, usually English. So that's because they want to like attract students from abroad. Okay, and then this is the last thing. So the grading scale is different. It's not A to F. It's like 1 through 5, with 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. So it's a numeric scale. And yeah, I'll just kind of skip over this because I know I have a little, it's kind of long. But for the most part, the academic year is from September to June, which is similar for our like time schedule, and it's about 5 hours long of a school day, starting earlier for the most part, I think, than most American schools do, and going until about 1:30. And usually like lunch is eaten outside of school. And sometimes children can come back after school, or people can go back to school after lunch to do like separate activities. Most of the schools are public schools and they're free. And most of the time they're held in the morning, like classes. Also, college is very cheap, so tuition fees are lower than in the USA, but like colleges are very different. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're like bad or anything, it's just a different, so yeah. Okay, very cool. I will let Anna move on next because I know that I took a little bit of time. So take it away, Anna. Can't hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm going to be presenting on Nicaragua today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience there. When I was living in Nicaragua, I lived with the host family. And so I had, there was a 6-year-old who was going to school. And then I also worked at a school for children with disabilities. So I also just want to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. And great. Okay, so, all right, awesome. Here we go. Okay. All right, great. So again, Nicaragua is in Central America. It's this red country right here. The capital is Managua. And then I was in Nicaragua, so it's in the mountains in the northern region right about here. Okay, so a daily schedule for a child. So again, this was my host nephew, Brian here. He's practicing words. But so a basic schedule is that, you wake up, you have chores in the morning. So you like cleaning, washing dishes, things like that. And then you have breakfast. And so our host mom, she cooked. So it was a nice breakfast. And then getting ready for school. And so then most children, they either walk or they take the bus to school. And this is usually a public bus, or it can be a school bus, depending on how nice the neighborhood is or the area is. But also some children, they may have to walk a very long time to get to school because they live in rural areas or they don't have many resources. So then you have school, and it usually ends about 12 to 2 p.m. So most children go home for lunch. I just remember Brian, he would always come home around about 1 p.m. and then our mom would make lunch, and it was great. And so after that, you may have chores again or free time. So you can play with like other, your brothers and sisters or neighborhood kids, go to the park. And dinner and homework. So a pretty normal schedule, I'd say. I knew when I was growing up, I had a pretty normal schedule like that, except our school usually ends at about 3. 3:30 depending, or, if you're younger, it may end at 2. So it's very similar to our school system. And so I had a short video. Let's see. But I'll come back to the video just to see if we have time for it. But again, going over the school system. So the school year actually runs from February to November, which is a little bit different from our schools. We run from about August to May, and it's kind of interesting. And so you have primary and elementary school, which is grades 1 through 6. So this is free, and it's usually compulsory for all students. So that means that you have to go, but unfortunately that's not always the case. Some young children are not able to attend school. This may be because there's not one in that area. They need to stay home and work and help with the family tours or things like that. But most children do go to elementary school because it is free, which is great. So then you go into secondary school, which is similar to high school. So again, there's not really a middle school, kind of like in Hungary, but so secondary school is 7th grade through 12th grade, which you're in 8th grade now, so you would be in secondary school. And then after this, you can go to a vocational school for 2 to 3 years, or you can go to a tertiary school or university for 4 to 5 years afterwards. So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. Again, vocational school is learning a trade, if you wanted to be an electrician or something, whereas university is more academic. Say you want to study psychology, that's where you would go. And so these pictures over here, you can see there are very many different types of schools for all different children, depending on, again, resources in your area. If you're in a very rural area versus a very urban area, so cities. And so a lot of the time children have to wear uniforms, but sometimes that's not the case. Okay, so secondary education. So this is high school, 7th to 12th grade. This is pretty interesting. So it lasts about 5 years. In the first 3 years, so ages 12 to 15, is the basic cycle. So this is where you're learning, just your basic math and English. Maybe you're working on a language, science, things like that. So everybody kind of has the same basic curriculum. However, in the last 2 years, so when you're 15 to 17, this is the diversified cycle. So you have 2 different tracks. You can go in for a bachelor's of arts and science. So this is a liberal arts oriented course of study, or you can do the vocational, the técnico medio, 3-year course of study in one of the technical secondary schools. So again, if you wanted to learn a trade, you wanted to be a carpenter or something, maybe you could take this course. So in Hungary, you're kind of deciding early on what track you want, what you want to do, which is very different from the U.S., where we all receive, have the same curriculum. While there are certain levels, it's essentially the same curriculum. And so then here you're choosing. So, you're either going more liberal arts oriented or more or technical studies. Excuse me. So something really important to me when I was in Nicaragua was working with children with disabilities. So I'm sure you have children with disabilities in your school. Maybe it's called the Exceptional Children, EC program, or it's called a variety of different things. But in Nicaragua, there are less options for children with disabilities, which is really unfortunate, but it is the reality. And so there are limited options for school, which means that they're unable to learn essential skills. So, even just going to school and and learning some things, that's so helpful and great for these students, because they should be treated with the same respect and the same dignity as other students. However, a lot of the time, it's not possible for families to be able to help them get to school, or there are programs in school, regular schools, And so also it can be very costly financially because, working on transport and also if there's any medical care that needs to be taken care of, then that it just may be too costly to be able to send them to school and account for these different costs. And so this was there was a really interesting study done, and it said 12% of children 0 to 16 have a disability in Nicaragua, but only 3.5% are enrolled in a special education program. So, I mean, that just lets you know that there's a huge gap between students who have special needs and those who receive an education or have a program to enroll in, which to me, that is very sad. But I think the really cool thing is that there are programs and schools that are now emerging in Nicaragua to help students with disabilities. And so one that I worked with was called Familias Especiales, which is like special families. And it's really cool. I included the website down here if you all want to check it out later. But it was just an amazing organization. And so it works with students with disabilities, just elementary school aged. And they have a program. They have a special bus that goes and picks children up around the city. These are some of my students. They were working, it was like a cultural festival day. And they were doing traditional dances from Nicaragua, which is really cool. So it had all different programs like dance. We worked on counting, colors. They had awesome programs for these students, which was really cool. So you can kind of see our classroom here. That's why I like this picture, is that, you can see we had a variety of students, different ages, different needs. Excuse me. And, the teachers here are volunteers. They're also people with experience. And so it's great because, this was a school run by Nicaraguans for Nicaraguans. And they're really helping out the students and providing these great programs for them. All right, cool. Sorry, I can't see you all otherwise if I don't do this, but, oops, my bad. So, all right, true or false? So raise your hand if you think this is true. There are 3 different tracks for secondary school. Okay, good. Right, that's false. Okay. The school day is the same amount of time in the U.S. So raise your hand if you think that's true. Okay, great. Again, it's false. 3, there are limited options for children with disabilities. Yeah, so that one's true. And so, like I said, it's just important to think about, what options there are in your own school and how how you think of other students with disabilities or without disabilities in your own class or not in your own class. And then also just thinking about, what options there are for these children in other schools. Cool. All right. So I have time. I'm just going to show a few minutes of this one video because I just think it's really awesome. If you just, let's make sure it works. Hold on one second. All right. Let's see if it works here. All right. Can you all hear it? Let's see. I want to go to, yeah, you can hear. Okay, so it's about 10 minutes long. So I'm going to skip to about the point where we get to school, but it's pretty cool. Can you all see it? Are you good?
Yeah. We can see it, but we can't hear it. You might have to do a share sound within the share screen function.
I can hear it, but it's just very quiet.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's quiet. Okay, then maybe I can work on turning it up. Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
Each day before the classes begin, all students of the elementary and secondary gather to pray. Twice a week, the student body sings their national anthem. At El Padul, Fernando and Nicole are two of many students taking English class. And all the students love learning through song. For part of the morning, Fernando studies natural science. Here, Fernando is taking his English oral exam.
What color is this ball? Yellow. Say the sentence. Very good.
Nicole and her fourth grade class wash their hands for lunch as the cooks prepare the meal. Nicole eats with her classmates and then plays some games as well. All of the elementary now departs for their houses, which includes Nicole and Fernando.
Cool. So that was just a little video. You can see the rest of it. I'm sure Ms. Sanderlin, if she's able to, might be able to show you the rest of it, but I don't want to take up too much more time. But just wanted you to kind of see maybe what a day in the life of a Nicaraguan student would look like a little bit. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Annie.
Okay. Hi guys. So I usually actually do this with the morning session, so I don't have slides to show you guys today, unfortunately. I'm just going to be telling you guys about daily school life in China. So I spent the last summer, not this past summer, but the summer before, working and teaching at a summer camp in Beijing, China. So to kind of give you a little idea, just in the summer alone, so China is actually, of all the countries in the world, Chinese students spend the most time in class on a daily basis as well as weekly out of any country. So on average, Chinese students spend about 9 hours in class. So from about 7 a.m. to usually around 4 p.m. or later. And I'll go into a little more detail about that later. But so I spent 2 months in China, and I worked at a private school. The private school is actually pretty common in China. So the camp I worked at, it was kind of an English language immersion summer camp. So it was a summer camp, but they learned a lot. It was 9 straight days for each section, and they had to start class at 7 a.m., and then they went until 5 p.m. And then after 5 p.m., they had afternoon sessions where they did extracurricular activities, where they practiced for a talent show. So even during the summer, they are in class sometimes 12 hours a day. So in China, they take their education very, very seriously. So as I said before, Chinese students attend class for about 5 or 6 days a week from around 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. or later. So this means 5 or 6 days, not just our usual, we usually go to school Monday to Friday. But in China, on Saturdays, many schools actually require morning classes in science and math. So it might not be the whole day, but a lot of times students have to go in the morning from like 7 to like 12 and take more classes. So they attend school a lot. So not only do they, a lot of Chinese students go to school from 7 to 4 p.m., a lot of students, especially the wealthier students, attend Cram schools after school as well. So Cram schools are held in the evening and on weekends. So it's kind of like tutoring, after school tutoring, like we have here. So I don't know, raise your hand if anybody's ever had any sort of tutoring, either like during lunch or after school, math tutoring, language tutoring. Okay, you guys might do it more in college when there's a lot of hard topics that you have to learn, but they are really rather intensive. So they go to school from 9 to 4, and then a lot of students will continue to go to school from 5 to 7 or 8 or even 9 p.m. So some students are in class for over 12 hours a day. So a lot of these Cram schools kind of focus on building additional skills in math and science, as well as in Chinese and English, and a lot of one-on-one tutoring as well. And I don't know, a lot of people have stereotypical perceptions of Chinese students. A lot of them are really good at math and really good at science. And there is definitely a really big focus on math and science in Chinese schools, but they also focus on Chinese, English, history, literature, music, arts, and physical education. But the methodology between the ways in which they teach in China and in the US or in the kind of Western education is slightly different. They focus a lot more on rote memorization. So in these kind of cram schools, they'll just sit at a desk and memorize all these different equations, a lot of different scientific terms. And so that's been something that China's been criticized, the Chinese education system has been criticized for, is that they don't really focus as much on kind of creative thinking, on arts, on those kind of, more thinking about it, having more flexibility in what you create, especially at the higher levels of Chinese education. It gets a little bit more intensive on math and science and memorizing these facts, because in particular, you have to take exams after middle school that will determine which high school you can get into. High schools in China are incredibly competitive and also, unfortunately, incredibly expensive. China has a rather complicated relationship issue with high schools in China. So technically, most public high schools aren't supposed to cost anything to students or their parents. But because there's been an increasingly amount of students who really want to go abroad and go to universities in the US or in the UK and Europe, it really depends on the school you go to and the grades you get. So they're really, really intensive in middle school or their version of middle school to get really good grades, get really good scores on their tests so they can get into these high schools. But even if they get into these high schools, usually they have to pay a certain amount of money, but under the table. So officially, the Chinese government does not encourage schools asking for money from parents, but a lot of parents, it's become the norm that parents will have to give donations to the school for their students to attend the school. And these donations range anywhere from $1,000, $5,000, or even more. So unfortunately, while they do have a public education system, there's a big disparity between students that have money, whose parents have money and can pay for their students to get into these more prestigious schools. And then the students who are living in the countryside who don't have the same resources to attend these cram schools, because one thing I didn't mention, the cram schools cost money. So they're going to school from 7 to 4, but then their parents are paying more money for them to go to these cram schools so that they can get even more information, learn even more, so they can get good grades on their tests, so they can get into the high school, which their parents will also have to pay for, most likely. So the students, unfortunately, don't have these resources. They still go to school. They still can go up to school in high school, but there isn't a level of equity. They don't have the same, they aren't able to really access the same amount of resources and attend the same schools that these other students can. Because while the government says they don't allow schools to charge money, it's become kind of the norm. Because a lot of students, a lot of parents want their kids to go to schools abroad. So it's another big thing. They pay to have their students go to these schools, and then they also pay for, there's a lot of organizations in China that work to help you create the ideal application for American universities or British universities. So those are kind of the more extreme side of Chinese education. It's very competitive. So there's a kind of stereotype of Asian students being, or Chinese students in particular, being very, very smart. While some Chinese students are really smart, others aren't. I had a wide range of students in my classes. Everyone told me before I went over in kind of a stereotypical way that your students are going to be so well behaved. Your students are going to be so smart. And I had some great students that were really smart and really good at math and science, but I also had some students that loved drawing and really loved sports. And so at their core, Chinese students are really, really similar to American students, but because of the way their education system is constructed with the intensive rote memorization, with the 9+ hours of schooling they receive 5 to 6 days a week, they definitely have a little bit of a leg up for against a lot of Western universities purely in the way in which their education system is structured. But they're not fully extreme focus on math and science. They also do have a lot of after-school activities like sports and music lessons. And they're becoming a little bit more common and more extensively found in schools. After-school activities, not just cram schools, are becoming more common. I think in part because American schools want to see that on your resume, but also I had a lot of students that really loved soccer and really loved basketball and really loved to play these sports and wanted to do this. So there's been a push for students as well, especially kind of seeing in the media other schools, what other schools are like in Europe, in North America, South America, and so forth. So there's been kind of a student-led push for more after-school activities and more access to that as well. So there's also been more competition between schools as well. So they've developed intramural teams, this kind of competitive style in between schools. So I did the education system, the schools are still competitive between each other, but now it's sports as well. And then you also have students who really love drawing and art and music. So those are definitely accessible as well. Kind of on the vein of the single stories that we've talked about before, Chinese students aren't just really good at math and science, they're just focused on math and science. Each student is an individual and very diverse, but the system and the way in which it's presented and constructed sometimes limits those expressions because it does have a focus on going to university, which in and of itself is competitive as well, and really hard to get into and expensive both in China and abroad. So that's another kind of complication that Chinese education system has been criticized for, but they're working on it because there has been kind of pushback from students and parents both in China and outside of China. Yeah. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, sorry guys, I'm gonna have to dip out early. I actually have a few other things going on today, but it's been awesome working with you this semester. And if you have any questions about anything, Nicaragua, traveling, education, working with students with disabilities, or I spoke about Ghana earlier this semester. If you have any questions about those, feel free to, ask Ms. Sanderlin to send us an email and I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks again. Have a great semester and happy holidays.
Thanks. So now do you guys want to take some questions or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if you guys have any questions for Sylvia or Annie about China or Hungary or about related to school or anything else, come on up and ask.
And I also studied in London for a semester, so if anyone has any questions about the United Kingdom, I can answer those as well.
Yeah, if anyone has anything about Austria, I also studied abroad there, so just a whole host of countries for you, I guess. Choose
many.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? Comments? Concerns?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kick you. Go ahead. Oh gosh, okay. So how is the dialect in Nicaragua? Oh my god, I cannot pronounce things today. What? Nicaragua. Different from dialects in other Central American countries.
Ooh.
So that would be for Anna, who had to leave, but we can email her that question to answer it. I actually used to be a Spanish teacher, and I can say that just in general for all the different Latin American countries, they all have a vocabulary that's a little bit different, and sometimes there's 5 different words for the same word in 5 different countries. But I will ask Anna, and I'll email you guys to see what some of the specific differences are for Nicaragua. Thanks.
Okay.
Good question, though.
We don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you guys again for a really nice semester and for listening to us today. I'll actually be doing the Zoom track again next semester, so I think we're working with you guys again. So you might be hearing more about me or about like from me, I guess, next semester. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks guys. It's been great. One thing, just a theme that kind of goes throughout all of the places we talked about. A lot of the students tend to learn English or kind of learn about other countries and really are thinking about long-term traveling abroad or going other places. And we've all traveled abroad, and it's really kind of shaped who we are, really influenced our experiences. So that's something we really kind of want to encourage you guys to do in the future when you go to college, even before, if you're presented an opportunity to go abroad, experience new culture, we really encourage you to take it. Or if anything, just try to, read more about the news, learn about what's out there. And remember, like, there's so many amazing different cultures out there, but there's at our core, human beings are all kind of similar. So you might think you have nothing in common with like a student from China, but there's something that you can always find a connection. So just kind of look for that.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very enriching experience.
And one final thing. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say that if you guys do end up going to a university like UNC, there's a lot of different opportunities for going abroad, and it's not always just studying abroad. Sometimes you can go for a summer. Sometimes you can go just for a fall break for 5 days if you want a little taste. There's a ton of funding opportunities where they actually pay for your trip to go. So if you want to go study, for example, in Asia, there's a program at UNC called Phillips Ambassadors where you can apply and they'll pay for you to go there. You can do internships and work abroad. You can volunteer. You can teach English like Annie did. Even if you don't go to university, there's opportunities to go abroad. For example, if you want to be an au pair and you want to go and take care of kids in another country for a year, you can do that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go other than just a traditional study abroad for a semester. And there's a lot of funding opportunities. Again, sometimes UNC will pay students to go do research in another country, or they'll pay for them to design their own project, or pay for them to go do an internship. So where I work at the Center for Global Initiatives, there's a lot of opportunities. There's also a passport drive at UNC every year, and UNC gives out and pays for about 75 passports for students that have never had a passport. So if you don't have a passport and you're paying for college and that's tough, sometimes UNC will pay for you to get that first passport. So just encourage you to look for those opportunities when you are done with high school or even in high school, because there's a lot of different options out there.